Hi, I'm Professor-Patti. I earned tenure by the time I was 30. By 35, I was down in chronic nerve pain. No doctor could find the source, and I was diagnosed for lifelong chronic pain. The Greeks, 2,000 years ago, labeled trigeminal neuralgia as the worst pain a human can know. Today, it is nicknamed the suicide disease, as 50% of people take their lives within the first 3 years of onset. By my 3 years, the only hope I had was a phone call from Ohio State University uninsured advanced medical program. I set my deadline for July 2012 to bypass holidays, my brother's and my parents' birthdays. July would be my undoing, either if OSU wasn't going to call or if they had nothing new to tell me. I would have to take my life. Of course, I was depressed, but I looked at it more like putting a dog down when they're too sick and it's better off for them. I was a burden to anybody. Plus, the 5 areas of my brain that make up my ADHD were unmedicated, so I was literally a nervous wreck. I looked bad, but not bad enough that anyone could see something wrong with me. All of my friends abandoned me. Family didn't understand, got angry, but my poverty was wealthy because of my parents. Beyond the hot dagger stabbing through my neck, cutting my ear, and coming out my temple, while my cheek goes into the tightest pinch you can imagine, shooting bolts of fire while stabbing me. Beyond that, the heartbreak that nobody cared, nobody loved me. From everybody loves you, Patty, to silence. I know all sides and spaces of suicide. I've been, I thought, completely alone. I've existed in the worst pain. I've been scared with no end in sight. Too nervous to leave home. I've watched as masses morphed into walking cokeheads. A pandemic of narcissism caused by social media. And I've hated every one of you. And while the left side of my brain was saying, end this is awful, the right side of my brain said, fight. And I could do that as long as I had hope. It is nearly impossible to survive life being human unloved. It will lead anyone at least to the thought of ending their life. I was born 3.5 weeks late with the sun, moon, 3 planets, and a meteor all in Libra. I don't know what most of that means, but I do know that my nature is peace and beauty, and all of that was wrecked. And all of this seems impossible to sustain, but you can, we do. Without hope, I would not have made it. For even love without hope is death. And instead of ending my life, and therefore the pain, in July of 2012, I gave birth to life. I was still in pain, but I had hope and love and insurance. Then finally, change. I met a doctor who performed a therapy that the first doctor I went to when the pain first started could have performed. My youth, my 30s, stolen. My beauty wrecked. My career destroyed. My entire life dead except my daughter and my breath. The only part of me that felt living. Luckily, the anger didn't last as long as the pain. But because of all the loss, I found secrets, not so secret, just unknown, that enabled me to take back some of what was stolen. And in sharing these answers, I've found helping you is much better than hating you. I can promise you, you are not alone. You are not unloved. In the loneliest, darkest places life and our minds can take us, I found that we are all special, for we carry a piece of love and light within us, as we are the children of the Most High, who is love and the brightest light. Next, my genius friend, Dr. David Snyder, is going to show you a pose that is going to instantly make you feel better. Once you learn it, use it. Whenever you're nervous, do it. Whenever you have to go meet someone new, do something new, see somebody new. Whatever it is, do what he's going to teach you before you go. Always. He will walk you through another exercise, what's been missing. You can't get past the science of anxiety. Your brain needs reprogrammed. And Dr. David's going to help you with that. This is for any anxiety diagnosis. Absolutely everybody 13 and older needs this video. If you know a veteran, send them this video, please. Too many are dying. The sooner you have squelched these things that hold you back, the fear that holds you back, that you don't even know why you have, especially, your life is going to be so much better. It doesn't matter if you're depressed or not. It doesn't matter if you're suicidal or not. This is absolutely information and strategies everybody needs for life. After Dr. David, Charles Linden, he's going to tell you about his horrific history with anxiety, the many different types of diagnoses that he had. He's going to tell you what anxiety really is, and then he's going to show you how to end it. Dr. David healed the PTSD I had sustained from chronic pain and horrible things that happen to you when you're living in poverty. Charles's TLM gave me further understanding and more tools to cure the anxiety. Hope is here, and you're going to feel better. And if this isn't the answer, it's the answer to get you to the answer. Hope is here.
Hi, my name is David Snyder, and welcome to Fearless Confidence. Today we're going to be discussing one of the topics that people find the most, they're in the most need of, for lack of a better word. We're going to talk about confidence only briefly, primarily because over the years, as I've worked with clients both in clinic, in live events and trainings, and one-on-one in various applications, everything from dating and attraction to negotiation and mediation to even kinesic interview and interrogation techniques. The one thing influencers of all kinds tend to focus on is this need for confidence. But what I've discovered after really just kind of burrowing below the surface into the subject of confidence, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be confident, but what I am saying is that what most people think of as confidence is really just fear. More often than not, when you're hearing somebody say, I need to be more confident, I want to have more confidence, what they're really saying on a functional level is that I just want to stop being afraid. And so today we're going to talk about we're going to start with some very quick and very powerful tactical ways that you can stop being afraid and start entering that confidence zone in as little as 2 minutes, right? If you find yourself in a situation or a circumstance where you've been knocked off of your game, for lack of a better word, or you need to be on your game going in, we're going to share with you some very, very specific tactical approaches that you can begin to install and utilize right away. If you've done nothing but watch the first 5 or 10 minutes of this video and you had these 1 or 2 techniques, you could go out and significantly improve your performance in any theater of influence, whether that's self-influence, whether that's influencing a man or woman to go out with you, whether that is walking into the trial or courtroom, the voir dire room. So I like to say in all my trainings and things like that, these techniques are universal. They will help you in every field of endeavor, from the courtroom to the classroom to the boardroom to the bedroom and all points in between. So the first thing I want to talk to you about when we talk about confidence is I want to talk to you about something I call the mind-body feedback loop. Now, most of us in the self-help world, the self-development world, we know that there's a feedback loop that exists between our mind and our body. But what a lot of us don't really understand, or what a lot of people don't really understand, is how do we influence that in a more bulletproof way. What most people teach us is that we need to exert our willpower to control our mental and emotional state. And that's okay, except that when you find yourself in high stress environments, when you find yourself in situations and circumstances that activate the level of emotional arousal within you, which is another way of saying stress. And fear is just a more extreme form of stress. Anxiety, just in a more middle ground between extreme fear and just tension form of stress. All of these things are on the fear continuum. So one of the things that we have to understand is that the way your brain works and the way your neurology works is that the more stress that enters your body, the more it has to manage that stress, the more rapidly your conscious mind checks out, the more it loses its ability to function and control that state effectively. So unless you're one of those special people who is trained as a first responder, someone who's a highly trained military person, somebody who is an extreme athlete, somebody who's used to functioning in these high stress, high level environments, you're going to find out more often than not that the environment is what will count against you. And your ability to control and manage that state and be confident is going to work against you. It's not going to be as accessible if you rely on strictly your willpower. Now, I'm not going to get into my whole dissertation on willpower versus physiological state control. Instead, we're going to jump right into some tactical things that we can start to begin to apply right away. And I'm going to give you some resources. I'm going to give you some things that you can begin to experiment and explore on your own. The first one I want to talk to you about is, again, this goes back to this whole mind-body feedback loop. The mind-body feedback loop works like this on a functional level. All science aside, this is how you make it work. For every psycho-emotional state that you have, and fear is a psycho-emotional state, for every mood that you're in, depression is a mood. In future videos, we'll be talking about how to use your physiology and your posture to alleviate depression. Anxiety, fear, these are all states, but each and every one of those states has a corresponding physiology, a corresponding posture, a breathing pattern, that when you change that physiology, you change your posture, you can't maintain your state any longer. Now, normally, if you were in my class, if you were in my trainings that you see on YouTube, or in my trainings like CPI, where we're teaching killer influence, or we're teaching covert hypnosis or conversational persuasion and influence, we would spend an entire day, practically, on just learning how to do all of those things. Now, obviously, in the short video that we have, I have to skip a lot of steps. But my goal here is to give you exactly the tools you need to start performing better today as well as giving you a special set of processes that over time, sometimes immediately, sometimes over a few sessions, will dramatically change your internal world. The fears and the triggers that you carry inside of you will simply begin to go away. They'll begin to diminish. But that's coming in the second part of our video. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to understand a few key concepts. A, your mind and your body are linked, and the fastest, most powerful way to change that is to change your posture and your breathing. Now, most people who come to a hypnotist, who come to a neurolinguistic programmer, they're going to give you a progressive relaxation induction. They're going to guide you and teach you how to relax each and every part of your body, and that's great. But you can't do that out on the street. You can't do that in a crowded bar. You can't do that in the courtroom. You need something that you can apply right away. I'm going to teach you two very powerful techniques that you can just start going out and making changes with and start getting effects right away. And then we're going to go into what I call the shit clearing process. Now, in World According to David, shit has a very special meaning. Secret human influence technologies. And these are ways that we're going to go in and we're going to clean up all the things that used to make you afraid, all the things that used to make you hold yourself back, all the things that used to trigger you to not do the things you want to do and to feel naturally more confident. Because being confident is your birthright. But you don't need confidence in the way that the self-help community teaches us to be confident in order to be successful. And for the purposes of this video, I'd like us to think of confidence using David's definition rather than the one you might pick up in the dictionary or in some of these other self-help trainings. I want you to think of the word confidence to mean a sense of relentless determination combined with a positive expectation, or the expectation of a positive result. You see, you don't need to be confident to be successful. You have to have a strong desire and a relentless determination to make it happen. And when you combine that with a strong positive expectation, or a strong expectation of a positive outcome, now you have all the things that come together to form functional confidence. And there's no top limit to that. Right? A lot of times when we as practitioners create mental movies, we're creating movies in our head, but we're not really affecting the body. And my friend, the one thing that we need to affect more than anything else is your body. We need to get that meat suit going, for lack of a better word. And so some of the most powerful change work will involve getting your body involved. So if you bought this video hoping to just kind of kick back, go into a vegetative state, and just let the words flow in, well, that's going to happen too, but not in the way you might expect. So the first thing I want us to do is I want us to hone in on two very powerful techniques that are going to teach you a little bit about how your mind and body interact with each other. And the reason for that is my job as a teacher, my job as a trainer, is to teach you how to become progressively more self-aware so you can exert more control over all the things that push your buttons without your knowing it. So first and foremost, if you get the time, there's the information I'm going to share with you in just a moment comes from a video known as Power Poses by a lady named Amy Cuddy. You can find her TED Talk freely available on YouTube. I highly recommend you reference that video because she has done all the science behind the thing I'm going to teach you. It turns out that when it comes to changing our emotional state, that certain postures and certain breathing patterns will actually cause the hormonal balances in our body to change many times in as little as 2 minutes. And so on a theoretical level, that's cool. On a theoretical level, that's kind of neat, but can we actually, how does that actually help us? Anytime you find yourself going into a state that is not conducive to what you want, so you got to know what you want ahead of time. But anytime you find you're going into a state that's not conducive to what you want, where you need to be more confident, if you assume one of the poses I'm about to teach you, and you hold it for as little as 2 minutes, your blood chemistry will change. The corresponding psycho-emotional state, the feelings in your body will start to shift to a more confident, assertive, dominant, relaxed state, scientifically. So the first one I'm going to teach you is one we've seen many times before. It's called the Superman or the Victory Pose. And it looks like this. And we're going to hold it together for 2 minutes, just because. Okay? So I'm going to Just hold your head. Now, I want to make a distinction with this one real quick. A lot of times people who are chronically depressed or who have a lot of fear or a lot of victimness in them, a little bit of a victim mindset, or the world is out to get me kind of a mindset, they start off with this strong victory posture, and over the course of several seconds it becomes this. This is not the victory pose. This is the hanging in the dungeon waiting to be tortured pose. So we got to remember that when we want to activate the physiological changes in our body, the hormonal changes in our body, we got to roll that chest up and out. We got to roll those shoulders back. We got to look up. And we got to think victorious thoughts. Now, you don't actually have to think the victorious thoughts or replay victorious ideas in your head for this to work. Just the posture, if you hold it for as little as 2 minutes, based on the studies, will show a 20%, up to a 20% increase in the amount of testosterone your body's going to produce. It's going to show a corresponding drop in the amount of cortisol, which is the stress hormone that your body is going to produce. So holding this posture for as little as 2 minutes will result in you becoming progressively more dominant, confident, assertive, and more relaxed at the same time. And that's important. Okay? Because as you become more relaxed and dominant, people perceive you and respond to you differently. Because all of you is changing at the same time, you won't necessarily perceive the change, but everyone around you will. And the interesting thing about this is that when they tested this, just beyond the blood chemistry ratings, where they took people who assumed these poses and in double-blind tests, put them in the most challenging, grueling, interpersonal environments you can imagine, the people who held these poses always scored consistently higher than the control groups and the people who didn't do them. So this is the first pose. This is the first idea I want you to have. Anytime you're about to do self-work, anytime you're about to do an affirmation, anytime you're about to meet somebody for the first time, do a presentation, find a stall, find a place where you can be alone for as little as 2 minutes and hit that pose. Just hit that pose, okay? That's our first one, and that's awesome, right? That alone will break any state that you're in. Because one of the problems that we have is we don't try to be confident until we feel less than confident. That's the problem, is confidence is always a result of us feeling something else. It's always a result of us feeling anxious or fearful, rather than becoming our baseline. Does that make sense? So if you're going to do confidence building work, if you're going to create that sense of relentless determination combined with an expectation of a positive result, you got to break whatever state you're in so nothing is tainted. But just doing this a few times a day will dramatically change your life. Now, a lot of people know this. I'll give you my pedigree a little bit later, because right now I'm all about getting you functional fast. I consult, I still do as a matter of fact. I do a lot of jury and trial consulting with lawyers and personal injury attorneys. And I had a client who was very nervous about giving a deposition or actually working in front of this one judge, who apparently was just a mean, hard to get along with judge. And so I taught him the power pose. And what happened was he would hit, right before he would go into court, he would hit the pose. And he felt dramatically better. He felt a lot more calm in the courtroom. And he did really, really well. But that's that's kind of cool. But the really cool part was he had a client who was going to be he had a witness that he had to depose or was going to be deposed, and that client was absolutely terrified of testifying. And he also happened to be the coach of a football team, high school football team. And so what I didn't know, I found out this later, was that he taught his witnesses how to hold these power poses. And he did really, really well when he was actually on the stand. And then a few weeks later, he came back with another story. It turns out that particular high school football coach had been the coach of a losing team. They hadn't won a championship in 5 years. And so what happened was, during half times, during breaks, the coach would have his entire football team holding these poses. And they swept the championship that year. So don't underestimate the power of what I'm sharing with you. It can turn losers into winners really quick. And it can create within you the exact right foundation to build on, that you can use to add any state you want, any outcome you want. Anytime you're afraid, anytime you're nervous, anytime you're feeling less than, assume the position. Hold it for as little as 2 minutes. You can hold it longer if you want to. But hold that position for as little as 2 minutes, and your results will change. Now that's step one. That's where we're going to start. Okay? But we got to get the meat involved. We got to get our body kind of playing a little bit. So I'd like you to stop for a moment. I'd like you to use your imagination. This gets us into something I like to call point and click therapy. And the whole idea behind this is that we need to understand that every behavior that we generate, every decision that we make, as rational and logical as we think we are, is based on a feeling in our bodies. It's a feeling that we either want a whole lot more of or a whole lot less of. And each of those feelings is like a holographic container, a bubble with massive, massive amounts of information in it. Now, we're not going to get too far into that right now, just the functional stuff. The bottom line is all of that information that your neurology is processing emerges from a single point, a feeling point. We call that the somatic address. So when you have a feeling, when you have something that's holding you back, or you're seeing pictures in your head, it's not the picture that's the problem. It's the way that picture or that voice is making you feel. And so as we change those things inside us, I give you the tools in the second part of this video to go in and systematically change all of that. Everything else will change. But the first thing we want to do is we want to look back again at state control. Remember, confidence on a functional level is relentless determination combined with the expectation of a positive result. The most important part of that is the relentless determination. You see, there's been many times in your life when you've been faced with something you had absolutely no confidence in your ability to achieve. Every time I ask an audience, I ask by a show of hands, how many people have ever had something that they absolutely had no confidence in their ability to do, but it had to be done? And you found out, you knuckled down, and you went and you did it, and you achieved the goal, even though you had no confidence. And then I asked them, I'm going to ask you the same thing, just to think about this for a moment. When you think about that, when you think of those moments where there was something that had to get done, but you didn't have the confidence to do it, but it had to get done, so you knuckled down and you did it anyway. When did the confidence actually come? If you're like most people, you'll discover the confidence came after you did the work. And that's the secret. You've got to get started. You've got to take action. The best GPS in the world can't help you if you stay in one spot. A perfect something, or an imperfect something, is always better than a perfect nothing. So keep that in mind. You've got to combine whatever programming that we're doing with taking the steps. And if you do that, you're going to find out you're going to be more successful more rapidly. So that being said, let's go into our next technique. This technique I like to call it the magic frame. And what it does for you is it's going to teach you a little bit about your nervous system and how your nervous system creates your pictures, your internal environment, the things that make you afraid, the things that hold you back, the voices in your head are all under your conscious control. But in order for you to fully get that, you've got to create an interface where all of that can happen. So here's the first thing I want you to do. I want you to think of something I'm going to give you a very specific scenario for me, okay? I want you to remember a time in your life when you saw something you really, really wanted. And you decided you were going to get that thing no matter what. Come hell or high water, you made a decision, and then you made a plan, and you put that plan into action, and you nailed it. Home run. I want you to go back into that moment for me, if you will. I want you to see what you saw, hear what you heard, feel what you felt, smell and taste what you smelled and you tasted. But most importantly, what I want you to do is I want you to assume that posture that happened in that moment when you realized you nailed it, when you were the top dog, you made that goal, you got the result, you made the achievement, whatever it was. I want you to stand that way. I want you to breathe the way you were breathing and let those feelings come flooding into you. And as you do that, I want you to notice something. Where in your body do you feel it? I want you to go ahead and point to it. And I'd like you to use your imagination, if you would. Imagine that floating somewhere in the space around you is a picture that represents that amazing feeling. I'd like you to just go out, reach out with one of your hands, and touch it. That's right. Just pretend. Trust your first impression. We're going to talk about the dynamics of an unconscious response in just a minute. But as you touch that moment, I want you to take both of your hands now, trace the outline of that image so you know exactly how big it is. And then just for fun, grab it. And just like you would expand the windows on your iPhone or on your touchscreen at home, I want you to make it as big as a drive-in movie theater screen. Notice what happens to the feeling in your body. And bring it back. Notice what happens to the feeling. Grab it again. Keep the picture exactly the same size. And now what I want you to do is pull it closer to your body and notice what happens to the feeling. Lift it up over your head. Pull it down around you like a big blanket. Notice what happened. Did the feeling get stronger or weaker? How did it change? And when you're ready, just for fun, you can have this feeling back in whatever degree or whatever level of intensity you want in just a moment. But for just a moment, I want you to unwrap that feeling, lift it back up over your head. Now, I don't know where you live, but here in California, I used to live in Florida, so I have a moment. We play a lot of frisbee. I want you to imagine this thing's now shaped like a frisbee. I want you to just throw it all the way back over your head until it disappears behind the horizon. Now scan your body. Notice what happened to the feelings. Did they get stronger? Did they get weaker? Did they stay the same? It doesn't really matter. There's no right or wrong. Each of us has a unique way that we process these particular drills. Now, the interesting thing is it is a drill. The more you play with this, the more you play pretend, like when you were a little kid playing toy robber or toy cop or cowboys and Indians at home, the more rapidly your neurology is going to evolve, and you're going to have far more control over this dashboard. Lift your hands up now and imagine your hands are now the world's most powerful frisbee magnets. Once you imagine you can suck that picture right back into your hands. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to play. Take a few moments and play with your own neurology. I want you to move that picture around you. Make it bigger. Make it smaller. Pull it closer. Put it inside of you. Put it over your left shoulder or your right shoulder. And notice how each and every time you move that picture around, the feeling changes in some way. Take all the time you need in the next few moments to really get that. Notice how it changes. And I want you to keep playing with it. I want you to experiment with it until you find the exact position, size, and shape that gives you the sensation and the intensity level that you want, that gives you the best feeling humanly possible. And when you find that, fix it in place. Fix it in place. And as you do, notice how that feeling flows into your body. From your body into your bloodstream, from your bloodstream to every place your blood goes. Those feelings will start to flow. But you don't need to measure it or manage it or make it happen faster. Just notice that process taking place. Let it flow into every cell, and every nerve, and every DNA molecule. Reprogramming those DNA molecules, turning each and every one of them into a little pleasure factory. Each cell creating and multiplying and magnifying that amazing sensation until every cell in your body is generating more and more and more of these amazing feelings. Now, you don't need to measure it, manage it, or make it happen faster. Just notice the process taking place. Allow it to install itself completely. And when you know it's reached an intensity level where it's impossible to turn off, try to turn it off and notice what happens instead. Many people discover very, very quickly that that sucker just keeps getting stronger. And that's fine. Because that's a great place to be. You're stuck feeling good now. Isn't that cool? And it just gets better. So what I've just discovered and what I've just taught you in a very short time is this. That every feeling that you have in your body is pushing your buttons. It's changing how you relate to the world and the people around you. And the fastest way to change it is through your posture and your breathing. And once you've done that, if you can point to where any lingering sensations are in your body, and you touch it, you reach out and touch that picture, you now have the willpower capabilities, the idea of what we call superior thinking, the ability to change the coding system that your nervous system uses to create that change inside and make it whatever you want. That is control. That is confidence. That is the ability to modulate your state, to become whatever you need to be to get your outcome, to get your result, no matter what. Now, in a moment, not yet, but in just a moment, we're going to begin a process based on a new technology, holographic memory resolution, combined with some conversational hypnosis and neurolinguistics and things like that. You don't need to know any of that. All you need to be able to do is relax. Follow the instructions and just play pretend. Because if you can point to where you feel it, you can change it.
All right, so what we've talked about from the early parts of today, we talked about weight. We talked about weight issues and how the weight itself is almost never the problem. More than 25 pounds, 30 pounds, you're not looking at lifestyle anymore. You're looking at body armor. You're looking at things that have a significant emotional component that the weight is satisfying. Usually security or safety. Usually security or safety. Now, whether that security comes from not having enough growing up, or safety coming from having an appearance that detracts or deters attention, unwanted masculine attention, or some point in between, right, where food becomes a substitute for security in terms of connection and love and emotional nurturing. It's still the symptom. Satisfy the requirement that behavior is designed to accomplish, and the weight will tend to normalize. At least the behaviors that led to the weight gain and the maintenance will tend to normalize. There may be other things that have to be done to facilitate that. But, long and short of it, weight issues beyond 25 or 30 pounds are the result of some form of trauma. Now, when I say the word trauma, we have to change our definition of trauma. Because when we think of trauma, we think about horrible things. We think about car crashes and war zones and sexual molestation and all of these horrid things. Right? And we should. But we also need to expand our understanding of trauma to anything the nervous system views as life-threatening, even if it's getting your toy taken away when you're a 2-year-old. Even if it's mommy and daddy yelling at each other in front of you. Even if it's being alone in a room, or in a room with people and nobody's playing with you. These things are just as trauma-inducing as war zones. And in more cases than not, the root cause of the people who wind up in my chair. Okay? And here's the best part. It's once paradoxical and scary and amazingly cool at the same time. Everybody who suffers from trauma isn't broken. They're not broken. They feel that way. God knows they feel that way. A trauma, when you're manifesting symptoms, is the sign of a system functioning properly. It's just nobody taught you the dynamics of the system, so you didn't know what to do when the system did what it was programmed to do. So let me give you a basic idea, a basic understanding that I acquired. I acquired this really, a lot of the subtleties of it from again, I'm going to quote him again, Brent Baum, who I think is a tremendous resource. This stuff is a little dense. But for those of you who really are called to do this work, who I lovingly call a special kind of stupid, it's one thing to come to a seminar like to fix your own shit, or to get my help to fix your shit. But for those of you who are called to go out and fix other people's shit, that's a special kind of stupid. Right? It's not work you choose, it's work that chooses you. I'll let you know. God backdoored me on this one, dudes. I'm telling you. If you'd have told me 10 years I'd be seeing patients 5 days a week, doing what I do, 20 years ago, I'd have laughed at you. Because all I wanted to do was do martial arts, pick up women, and be cool. God had other plans, and God always does. But the secret, a lot of people ask me, I need to find out what my mission in life is. What's my mission? Depends on how you feel that day. Depends on how you feel that day. The fastest way to find your mission is follow your passion. Follow the things that feed your spirit. You'll discover your mission right before you leave this planet. Or right after you leave this planet, and you'll say, I did it! Right? God gave us the best GPS we could ever have. It's called our neurology. It's called our system of feelings. The universe works in a language of feelings and pictures and holograms. All of this information is, in fact, holographic. Okay? Let me see if I can... I'm going to try to do this in a very... I'm going to diagram it as best I can. And hopefully I can explain the trauma induction process in a way that we can understand. Now, NLP comes at this hologram from a very different place. When the neurology creates a trauma container, every time I think of a trauma container, I think of, you ever see Ghostbusters? Yeah. That little container they had that held a ghost in it? That's what I think about, right? This little container with all this shit floating around inside of it. But think about it this way. This is the line of your memory and awareness, right? And it fluctuates from state to state to state. Now, the interesting thing happens is that, let's say that this is baseline, right? We find moments of trauma. Let me move this up a little bit.
David, how do you spell Brent's last name?
B-A-U-M. B-A-U-M. Now, a trauma looks like this. It's a spike, an emotional spike in our system. All right? There's a certain level of neurological arousal. Now, what's happening is, this is 0 hour. This is terminal event. T0, right? This would be the moment of maximum emotional trauma and death. Okay? An interesting thing happens is our consciousness is pretty consistent. Our ego states are pretty consistent. As the trauma increases, there's a mechanism within our system that monitors till it gets to what we call T minus 1. T minus 1 is that moment just before the critical terminal event. And then the neurology does something amazingly cool. It turns it off. It literally zips that file and all the trauma in it into a container that it stores somewhere in your nervous system. When I had you point to where you feel it, you found the somatic address. When I had you notice the color, you started to bring out attributes of the container. Follow me? Now, within this universe, that moment, that ego state, that consciousness, that event is frozen in time. And it's happening over and over and over again. But it's quarantined within the neurology. It's quarantined within the body. And over time, the way your neurological sorting system begins to do things is it sorts things by similarities. It sorts things by things that have in common. That's why many times when you start to do these processes, you wind up somewhere completely different. Because it's not linear. It's not logical. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay? That ego state is a fragment of your consciousness. Holographic in nature, which means it's got everything that you knew and everything that you had and everything that you understood up to that moment in time. But for all intents and purposes, it's a separate organism. And we know it's not. It's a container. When we, either through the process of hypnotic regression, through some form of neuro-linguistic programming, or like Brent uses a holographic memory resolution process, from the present moment. By the way, once we hit trauma, a T-1, that gets frozen in time. Now, one of two things either happens here at T0. You're either dead or you survived. If you survive, the consciousness keeps going from that point forward. This is why you have blank spots in your memory from time to time. Those blank spots indicate containers that have been taken out offline until such a time as you have the resources. You have the resources to deal with it, or if you don't handle this shit, it's going to overload the system. Does that make sense? Okay. Whether the trauma is, something from a war zone or something that happened on the playground, something that happened in the living room, the mechanics are the same. You don't need, with this process, you don't need to re-dredge up the trauma and things like that. Those techniques are there if we need to use them. But it's important to remember that every memory that we have is a hologram. And it's a container at the same time for the emotional energy that was present at the time the scene was recorded. And it's that energy that is expressed holographically, that is connected to every other part of the body holographically. And you guys all know how a hologram actually works, right? A hologram is literally where they take a beam of light and they split it, and they send one beam to an object and the other beam to, I think it's a mirror or something like that, and to a photographic plate. And then because of the angles and the way the beams are split, what is imprinted on that photographic plate is a three-dimensional representation of the image. But the actual three-dimensionality of the image doesn't emerge until you shine a light through it. And all of a sudden you have a three-dimensional image. The interesting thing about holograms is that if you took that image and you cut it in half, all of the information from both sides of the hologram would be present in both of the pictures. And you could keep dividing it and it would be the same, the same, the same. No matter how many times you divided it down, the whole would be contained in the part. Acupuncture and Oriental medical theory has actually embraced this idea for a very long time. But now we're discovering that the very nature of our universe is holographic. Our memories and the way our neurology works is holographic. NLP, which has been around since the 70s, has approached the hologram through its component parts, the brick and mortar that we use to construct it, the visuals, the auditories, the kinesthetics, the olfactories. What Brent's approach is very different. His took on a more metaphorical approach in that when people describe their problem or they describe their pain, they describe it using a metaphor, mostly a shape. Sometimes it's an actual object that was in the environment. But no matter what they use to describe it, that metaphor is the container. It's the container that keeps all of that stuff circulating and stored. And you can use a metaphor to change a metaphor. You can use one hologram to change another hologram. And so the antidote for a lot of these things, you inject into the container a new awareness, a new consciousness of somebody who's survived. Because remember, terminal event hasn't happened yet. They still think they're in danger. They don't know that they survived. They don't know that they survived. Just the act of injecting another consciousness that inserts new information of survival changes things. Then you give that particular ego state, they like to call it, but it's really a hologram of your consciousness at that moment. You inject new information into that sealed environment and everything starts to change. And then you figure out what states or feelings resolve what's remaining. And you use that frame, that hologram, to connect and contact all the other fragments of that holographic representation. All happen. Point to where you feel it, notice the color, go inside, right? That alone would have, in our regular approaches to most forms of hypnotherapy, would have been a 20-minute process. That there, but just getting to that point where you can actually begin that kind of work. And then actually jettisoning or venting the stored emotion would be however long it took, right? This whole process took minutes. Right? It's this, the irony is we're still doing a lot of the same things we would do in conventional hypnotherapy. We're just using different metaphors and tools to do it. NLP did it. One of its big big claims to fame was the revelation of a personal timeline, a holographic sorting system that your nervous system uses to separate present from past from future. Right? And they could do really cool things with timeline. The problem a lot of times with timeline, though, was if you couldn't jettison the emotional charge, you couldn't get the change to stick. And because NLP tends to specialize in what we call light trance states, a lot of the old hypnotherapeutic approaches tended to work better because they involve deeper levels of trance. Okay? But that's how trauma, that's one of the ways that we can resolve trauma. Another way we can do it is we can point to where we feel it, take it out, spin it the other way, and put it back in. Still works faster than this. But sometimes we need to take a structural approach. In other words, how is that particular container built? The visuals, the auditories, the kinesthetics, the olfactories. Is it too close to the body? Right? That's one way we can affect it. We can affect it through the story of what happened. And we go in and we ask what happened, what happened, what happened. When I work, I try to work with as little information as I can, but sometimes I need to know a little bit of the story so I can direct and navigate. And we change the story because you're allowed to change the story. It's just shit that happened. And since you're in charge of the video, you're in charge of the editing deck, and you're the only one that's ever going to know, or care for that matter, you have the right and the authority to change it to whatever you want so that when you remember the past, you only remember it in ways that make your life better. Remember, we aren't the way we are because of the things that happen. That's a cop-out, even though we don't know it's a cop-out. We are the way we are because of the way we think about the things that happen, about the way we choose to remember them. And it is a choice. We didn't know we had a choice, but it's still a choice. Right? As I like to say, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Right? This is how our system works. And I've done this now with emotional eating. I've done it with, I did a 45-minute smoke cessation with this, where I literally took the guy back to the very first reason, his very first motivation to start smoking, and I asked him to give that little boy, everything he would need to know to not smoke anymore. And the problem we had was he wanted to smoke because he wanted to be like his dad. What do you do about that shit, right? So I said, well, what would have to happen for him to decide he didn't want to smoke anymore? Well, you have to experience the disgust. The first time you smoke a cigarette, it's never pleasant, right? And so he literally made the worst movie ever of going through that first puff. And he literally pulled it through him over and over and over again until the little boy just decided, I don't want to do that anymore. From start to finish, it took 45 minutes. By the end of the session, I couldn't even get him to touch the cigarettes in his pocket. Okay? Here's the one thing to remember. The most important reasons for people to do the things they say they want to do are their own. What the neurology generates, the neurology accepts. Whatever metaphors your neurology uses to express something. If I tell you to go to a gray room, a dome-shaped room with pearly gray walls, and you find yourself in an oblong room with a pink ceiling and a fuzzy, rug, that's how your nervous system does it. It's not wrong. We tend to make ourselves wrong if our internal experience doesn't match the guidance we're receiving. You as therapists need to have the behavioral flexibility to work with whatever metaphors of trauma or resolution that your client generates. Does that make sense? Yes?
Just a question, David, on with what you did with Julia.
Mm-hmm.
Book I read said, what to do, what to say when you talk to yourself. Could you do that in a conversation with yourself on those questions? Would that still...
Yeah, as long as you can enter the appropriate state and do the work, yes. Yeah. All of these things can be done as self or auto-hypnosis or self-generated resolution. The problem is that there's a part of us, the big problem we have with any of these processes, whether it's doing it for ourselves or doing it with other people, is the problem of compliance and absorption. You see, there's this process that rears its ugly head. It's called smart person syndrome or hypnotist disease, depending on how much training you've had. Okay, smart person syndrome is that part of us that doesn't think, wants to prove it doesn't work. Happens every now and then. We don't usually get those kind of people, but more often than not, it's people who want to kind of be in the experience, observe the experience, and analyze and judge the experience while having it. Well, if there's a part of you that's trying to do the process, another part of you that's trying to evaluate what's going on and learn, another part of you that's evaluating whether it's working or not, how absorbed are you in that process? The answer is you're not. To the degree that you lack absorption in the process is the degree it will take you longer to get this. The minute you start engaging the soma, the body, a lot of that starts to go away because you can't get the body involved without becoming progressively more absorbed. I have stories for that. The other part is focus, right? Because a lot of times we tend to exist at the same level as our trauma, from a logical levels perspective, it's very hard for us many times to rise above it and change it, right? So we can use that metaphorical approach, that neuro-linguistic holographic grid approach that we talked about, to create an interface, an imaginative construct which actually has actual physiological origins. Your proprioception and your mirror neurons play a massive role in the facilitation of this. And from that construct, using metaphor and structure, we can change what the neurology is doing. We can revisit any moment in time, as long as we understand the dynamics of unconscious response. It always feels like you're making it up. It's the first answer you get, regardless of how illogical or nonlinear it may seem. You're always going to have an urge to edit it, right? And it's always quiet. It's always in the background, right? There's an old saying that the conscious mind yells, the unconscious mind whispers. But remember, at the end of the day, if you can feel it and point to it, you can change it. Okay?
The amygdala is a pair of small organs in the brain, each about the size of an almond. The amygdala acts like a thermostat, regulating, among other things, our normal baseline anxiety level. As anxiety levels rise in response to stressors such as bereavement, work stress, or money worries, for example, the amygdala's needle is pushed up to the high anxiety zone. Under normal circumstances, this needle returns to normal after the event. But when the stress or anxiety you experience is relentless, the needle gets stuck at the high anxiety position. It becomes instinctual. The subconscious mind, which controls all the automatic bodily systems, thinks that this new anxiety level is appropriate and normal, but you know consciously that it is not. It is as if the hard drive of your mind has been reprogrammed with new anxious software. With this new anxiety level come sensations and symptoms of anxiety disorder and maybe panic attacks, phobias, and disturbing thoughts. So in order to reverse these changes, you have to reset the needle of your amygdala back to the normal position. The Linden method does exactly that. It shows you exactly what you need to do today to keep your responses in the normal zone tomorrow. It can be that fast. Once your subconscious has this new set of rules, it can't turn back.
Have you been told that you can't be cured of your anxiety condition? I was told that. It's just not true. Anxiety isn't an emotion. It's a disorder of the emotion of fear. And as a disorder, it can be removed completely. The Linden Method program will help you to remove the disordered part of your fear response, taking you back to normal fear responses, normal emotional balance. It's so structured, it's so simple and so scientific. All you have to do is follow the program structure and your anxiety will reduce back to normal emotional responses. You will get rid of every manifestation of your anxiety, your panic disorder, agoraphobia, OCD, PTSD, derealization, depersonalization, your health anxiety, emetophobia, eating disorders, self-harming. It all fades away when you get back to that emotional balance. And the Linden Method program will teach you exactly how to do that. So what is the Linden Method? Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about what it isn't. It isn't what's failed you before. Presumably, if you've suffered from anxiety for a while now, you've had other treatments. You may have tried medication or therapies. Have they worked? Have they removed your anxiety? The answer is probably no, which is why you're watching this video now. I was in that position too once. Many years ago, I suffered from anxiety, panic attacks, agoraphobia, OCD, emetophobia, health anxiety, the whole gamut of anxiety conditions. And it doesn't matter who I asked, they didn't have any answers. If I asked about specific symptoms, they didn't know why they formed. If I asked why I suffer, they didn't know. They didn't know how to cure me. I asked many practitioners many times, and now, with the benefit of working with people for such a long time, many years, I've realised that all anxiety sufferers have pretty much the same journey. And that builds desperation. All we want is transformation. We don't want advice. We don't want to know what a panic attack feels like, or why we're emetophobic or agoraphobic. We need to know what happens in the body to create those disorders and how we can undo all of that mess of disorder inside of us. That's all I wanted. I know that's what is all that you want. Now, our programs, the Linden Method programs, are delivered in online, workshop, residential retreat, and also through our coaches, Linden Method coaches. Why do we do that? Because everybody learns in different ways. But the beauty of this program is that it outlines the exact way to recover. It's defined by evolution and science itself, not by practice models, practitioners, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists. This is about humanity itself. If you want to remove your condition, even if you've been told that you can't, and that coping and that management are the only two options that are ever going to work for you. I was told once that I would never be anxiety free, that I'd never have a proper job, that I'd never live independently, I would always take medication, I'd probably never have a career or a family. And now, years later, having all of those things and knowing how to cure people of their anxiety conditions, we've put together this program that since 1997 has NHS tested efficacy of nearly 100%, because it's like eating to cure hunger. It can't fail if you just do it. So follow the principles and you will recover. The Linden Method program is a psychoeducational program that has been reverse engineered from why I suffered, and now it will work for you. I knew that I'd found the solution because in under 2 days of doing the structure that I created, my anxiety and my panic attacks completely stopped. I didn't really know what it was like to be anxiety free after 27 years of suffering from chronic anxiety, panic attacks, agoraphobia, OCD, PTSD. I felt lighter suddenly, more focused, much less fearful, and totally fulfilled. And this really is the predominant experience of all of our clients. Linden Recovery is different because it outlines the process that has to happen in the body to deactivate the emotion of fear. No other program works in this way. Anxiety is the emotion of fear, not an illness, not a disorder, but a natural human response to threat. Linden Recovery uses simple to use techniques that even children of 7 do with ease, that tell the anxiety response that you're safe, and when it receives that message, it turns fear off permanently. I'm often asked why Linden Recovery costs money, and the answer is quite simple. Although the solution is very natural and fast, it requires a combination of reassurance, knowledge, structure and guidance. Some people open the program, do it and recover, but if that doesn't happen, we are always available to advise, reassure and guide our patients. The resource each program participant receives is enormous. Video, audio and written resources that cure our patients, plus outstanding support from our qualified team about any aspect of an anxiety disorder at any time when it's needed. If I'd been given access to Linden Recovery when I was anxious, it could have prevented 27 years of suffering, but then I'd never have discovered the solution and our anxious patients everywhere wouldn't have benefited. It's kind of a double-edged sword really, but I'm almost grateful for the anxiety I endured. Thanks to the amazing resource and support my team provides to sufferers, I know we cure anxiety disorders.
My son Louis went to the theatre just over a year ago and suffered a panic attack and stopped going out. Wouldn't get in a car, just stayed in his room. He's got OCD and just was really, really anxious.
I would have panic attacks, panic disorder, really, really bad panic attacks.
My world had become so isolated and so fragile, and it was a very debilitating lifestyle, and it was a dark period in my life.
I'd start sweating profusely, my heart rate would start going up, I'd be out of breath, and I'd just have to get myself out of the situation.
I had anxiety really bad. It affected me in so many ways, and it prevented me from doing day-to-day activities.
It developed symptoms of depression, and including thoughts of suicide and self-harm, harming others. And then all of this kind of led to alcoholism, where I just drank every day to help take an edge off of all these feelings.
I had a terrible fear of sick, and my anxiety prevented me from living a normal teenage life, going into adult life, and even a bit of childhood as well.
I was just an anxious mess, and I couldn't do anything.
I'm having these panic attacks, and my heart's sweating, my head's sweating. I don't want to be on the train, I don't want to be in the coach. I've had to leave supermarkets with trolleys full of shopping because I had to get out, and it was horrible.
I barely left the house, it even got to the point where if I could not leave my room, I would pretty much, any excuse not to leave my room, that would be the case.
My anxiety symptoms were OCD, I had a phobia, had an eating disorder, I was very housebound.
Suffered panic attacks every day, didn't leave my house for 12 months, and honestly thought that I would never leave my house again.
I was experiencing a complete hypersensitive state of anxiety continuously, 24/7, for about 6 months.
Couldn't go out with my friends, and if I did, I had to get my mum to take me there.
I would start to sweat, I would get spacey, I would freeze.
I couldn't do anything without having to harm myself, with it being pulling my hair out or like cutting myself, that I eventually attempted to take my life.
Great to find a normal guy who had experienced what I'd experienced and really understood what I was feeling.
I think the reason it worked is because everything that Louis was experiencing, Charles had been through.
But very caring, very human, and they have, a lot of them having suffered.
With a number of tools and techniques that actually, when put into practice, helped me eradicate my anxiety very, very quickly.
Everything was explained, it was just so easy to follow, and it made a massive, massive difference to my quality of life.
There's tips to tell you how, if you're in the minute of the panic attack, how to bring it down. And these things really helped me. So I took the method at home, and I can say that it's changed my life.
It gave me the tools to empower myself through my own recovery.
The tools that are given to you with the Linden method are effective if they're put into place correctly.
It educates you to know exactly what it's all about.
Simply having the knowledge about what was happening with me.
It is the most simplistic plan in the world, but my God, does it work.
Charles and Beth and the whole team, these guys know what they're talking about. They helped explain what anxiety is, why you've got anxiety, and it just all became so clear.
4 months now, I've been off the Charles Linden. Yeah, don't get me wrong, if I need the tools, just tap into Charles in my brain, and I'm ready to go.
I'm implementing the Linden method now, thanks to the retreat, and I've done more in this last month than I have in years. It's crazy. I didn't even think that would be possible, really.
Listening to his instructions and following them, I was out of my house.
It was probably the most, thankful thing that I'd gone on, because it gave me my life back.
Without the Linden method, I guess I would not be sat here today.
I heard about the Linden method, so I went to the facility and asked for help, and I got guidance from there, and ever since then my life has changed.
If you told me that I'd be like this in 2 weeks, being able to come out the house, be able to do what I want to do, be able to, you know, be happy and enjoy things in just 2 weeks, I'll tell you you're mad, that you're stupid, but honestly, the difference is phenomenal.
Recently I did some filming for a TV show called Gox Teens, and through this I went on a thing called the Linda Method, and they helped guide me through.
And Louis was able to follow the Linda Method, and it really, really helped him.
I did the Linda Method and it completely changed everything for me. Best thing I've ever bought by far.
I implemented the Linden method into my life, and I cannot explain in words the difference in my life.
If you're watching this and you're suffering, please know that you don't have to suffer any longer. There is hope, and you can get the life you want much faster and much easier than you have ever dreamed. And I hope you decide to make that choice. I wish you nothing but the best and a speedy recovery. Take care.
Why settle for anxiety management when you can have an anxiety cure? With 12 years of practice, research and development helping over 130,000 people like you to recover, our program is drug-free, scientifically verified and endorsed by psychologists and doctors. The Linda Method uses the body's natural anxiety reduction process to quickly return your anxiety levels to normal without effort. Neuroplasticity is the only way for you to cure your anxiety. Nothing else can do this. Neuroplasticity is the replacement of one set of memories or behaviours with another. It's the only way to stop an anxiety disorder. This program uses neuroplasticity to replace your anxious neural pathways with new, non-anxious ones. Resetting your anxiety in this way will permanently remove your high anxiety. The process is so fast and natural you don't even notice it happening. Natural and permanent elimination of your high anxiety and symptoms. Eliminate anxiety, panic, OCD, PTSD, agoraphobia, obsessive thoughts, depersonalization, derealization, and every anxious thought and symptom you experience. Being anxiety-free is already pre-programmed into you. All we do is show you how to turn your anxiety off. Simple, fast, and permanent anxiety elimination. You can start in the next 5 minutes. You'll get unlimited support from qualified specialists, 12 months satisfaction guarantee, unmatched after-recovery guidance, structured, simple material to use at home. You'll get access to our members area, full of support and materials. And you'll get the use of the most respected and successful program of anxiety recovery in the world.
Do the thing on the screen so you get notified. Let me know how you're doing too. Leave a comment or a sweet note. Bye, baby.